on the 12th of January, 1852, while the lower rooms of Crowther Grange filled with coal heat, polished voices, and the expectation of a duke, Miss Esther Fanshaw stood behind a locked door in the coldest chamber of the house with the original design Sir Walter Crowther intended to present as his own. Frost feathered the inside of the narrow window. The grate held only old grey ash. Far below, carriage wheels ground across the frozen drive as county gentlemen arrived to admire a new warming apparatus for the Duke of Malvern's winter garden. Esther could hear the softened authority of footmen, the chime of glass, and once, unmistakably, Walter's laugh. He was preparing to receive praise for creating warmth, while she had been hidden where none could reach her. She held the waxed linen tracing against her bodice, careful not to bend the lower corner repaired with red silk. 3 registration pinholes marked the upper margin. Brown ink crossed one section near the bypass channel, where she had corrected her first calculation before Christmas. Her father had taught her to preserve every alteration because a finished line concealed the labor that had made it true. Walter had copied the finished lines. He had not understood the work beneath them. An hour earlier, Esther had entered the small library and found his presentation portfolio open upon the escritoire. Copy B lay inside, bearing her initials in the lower corner and reproducing nearly every measurement from original tracing A. One detail had changed. A blue directional arrow near the smoke damper had been turned backward. In her design, smoke traveled toward the main flue. In his copy, the altered arrow could narrow the safe passage and drive smoke toward an occupied room. Esther had taken back her original tracing before Walter returned. Lady Deborah Crowther had intercepted her on the landing. Her aunt wore plum-colored silk and the expression of a woman prepared to call cruelty necessity. "You'll sign the statement," Lady Deborah had said, holding out a cream sheet. "It says only that you prepared a fair copy from Walter's conception." That would be false. It would preserve the family. A lie does not become loyalty because it benefits Walter. Lady Deborah's mouth tightened. "You have always mistaken usefulness for importance." Esther had kept her voice level. "Walter has mistaken possession for authorship." Mrs. Olney had appeared at the stairhead, carrying the household keys. Lady Deborah took the brass key from her before the housekeeper could speak. "Miss Fanshaw is overstrained," she announced. "She will rest in the north room until the showing is finished." "My lady, there's no fire laid there," Mrs. Olney said. "Then she will have quiet." Esther entered because 2 guests were already visible at the foot of the stairs, and Lady Deborah understood exactly how public resistance could be turned against an unmarried, dependent woman. The door closed. The key turned softly from the corridor side. Now, Esther drew her father's boxwood folding rule from her pocket. Its edges had been worn smooth by years of use, and the brass hinge had darkened where his thumb and hers had opened it across hundreds of plans. She unfolded it beneath the wall register. The opening measured 14 inches, but resistance met the rule less than 8 inches behind the iron slats. A warped wooden panel narrowed the passage. The room's cold was not caused by the north wind alone. Neglect had been built into it. Esther measured twice, then tapped the flue casing with the folded rule. Hollow at the left, dense at the right. She repeated the taps in a deliberate pattern, not a frantic pounding that Lady Deborah might call hysteria. A measured sound, like a craftsman testing a wall. Downstairs, a clock struck 3. Esther folded the rule and pressed her numb fingers around it until pain answered the cold. She would not shout. She would not beg Walter to return what he had taken. If the door opened, she would state the facts. If it did not, she would preserve the original and find another witness. Footsteps entered the north corridor. They were not Mrs. Olney's brisk tread or Walter's careless stride. These were even, unhurried steps, heavy enough to belong to a man accustomed to rooms making space for him. They stopped outside her door. The brass key shifted faintly beneath a gloved hand. A male voice asked, "Why is this door locked?" Silence followed. Then Lady Deborah's skirts whispered rapidly along the passage. "Your Grace, you've taken the wrong corridor. My niece asked to be left alone. She has a headache." The man did not move away. "Does a headache require a key on the outside?" Esther closed her eyes for one brief instant. Nicholas Redmayne, Duke of Malvern, had arrived early. She had seen him only once, across a Worcester assembly room, where he had listened to 3 landowners debate drainage, without interrupting any of them until each had contradicted himself. He was known for rebuilding bridges, inspecting tenant cottages without notice, and making decisions before slower men had finished, explaining why nothing could be done. Lady Deborah lowered her voice. "Miss Fanshaw becomes overwrought when she works too long. It's kinder not to indulge her." Esther stepped close to the door. "Your Grace." The corridor went still. "Miss Fanshaw, I did not ask to be left alone." A pause followed. It did not feel like disbelief. It felt like attention. "Then why are you locked in this room?" Esther laid one hand over the red silk repair. "Because Sir Walter means to present my work as his own, Your Grace." Lady Deborah gave a wounded exclamation. "Esther, don't be absurd." The Duke's answer came without raised volume. "Open the door. This is a family matter. It became my matter when Sir Walter attached it to a commission bearing my name. She is confused. Then opening the door will do no harm." Lady Deborah said nothing. Nicholas spoke again. "Open it." The key turned. Esther stepped back before the door swung inward. Warm corridor air reached her face, carrying beeswax, coal smoke, and winter greenery from the stair hall. Lady Deborah stood rigid beside Mrs. Olney. A footman stared fixedly at the wall. Nicholas occupied the threshold without crossing it. He was broad-shouldered beneath a dark frock coat, his hair wind-touched from the drive, his expression controlled. His gaze moved once over Esther's pale face, her stiff hands, the folding rule, and the tracing held against her. He did not reach for her. He did not command her to sit. He stepped aside and left the doorway clear. Esther walked out under her own strength. Only when she had crossed the threshold did Nicholas look past her into the unlit room. His eyes settled on the empty grate, then the frost inside the glass. How long? Less than 2 hours. And the drawing? Esther lifted the waxed linen. Mine. Lady Deborah moved at once. That is precisely the difficulty. Esther assisted her late father and has persuaded herself that every plan she copied became her creation. I made the calculations, Esther said. I prepared the working design. I corrected the damper channel. Walter copied it. Nicholas studied the 3 pinholes, the brown correction, and the red silk repair without touching any of them. Can you prove that? I can explain every line. His gaze returned to hers. There was no softness in it, but there was seriousness, and Esther had been denied that more often than kindness. Then you will be heard. Footsteps sounded at the far end of the corridor. Sir Walter appeared, flushed from the stairs and carrying a second roll of waxed linen beneath his arm. He stopped when he saw Esther free, the Duke beside her, and original tracing A still in her hands. For one instant, his confidence vanished. Then he smiled. There you are, Esther. We've all been troubled by your little misunderstanding." He unrolled copy B. In the lower corner, beneath the reversed blue arrow, stood the initials EF. Sir Walter's smile remained in place as he held copy B open beneath the corridor lamps. But the color had begun to rise beneath his collar. "You see," he said, directing the words toward Nicholas rather than Esther. "Her initials. This is an unfortunate family misunderstanding, nothing more." Esther looked at the reversed blue arrow near the smoke damper. "My initials were copied with the rest." Walter gave a quiet laugh. "That is a remarkable accusation from a woman standing with my drawing in her hands." "This is not your drawing. Then you should have no difficulty proving it." Nicholas's gaze moved from one, tracing to the other. "Not in this corridor." He looked toward Mrs. Olney. "Is there a room with a fire, a clear table, and sufficient light?" "The morning room, Your Grace. Have it cleared." Lady Deborah stepped forward. "Surely there's no need to disturb the guests. There is every need to prevent them from admiring an unsafe apparatus." His tone did not rise, yet Walter's smile vanished. Within minutes, the morning room held only Esther, Nicholas, Lady Deborah, Walter, Mrs. Olney, and a footman instructed to remain near the door. The coal fire burned high enough to soften the stiffness in Esther's fingers. Mrs. Olney spread clean green baize across the long table before Esther placed original tracing A upon it. She kept one hand near the repaired corner. Walter laid copy B opposite hers with more confidence than care. "Anyone may see the truth," he said. "I prepared the conception. Esther produced a fair copy. She has always possessed a neat hand." "A fair copy does not contain the decisions that created the design," Esther said. Lady Deborah took the chair nearest the fire. "Don't make this uglier than it must be." Esther did not look at her. "It was made ugly before I was locked away." Nicholas stood between the two ends of the table without claiming either position. "Miss Fanshaw, show me what distinguishes your drawing." Esther unfolded original A fully. The waxed linen caught the winter light and revealed the faint history beneath the finished lines. These 3 registration pinholes fixed each revision to the sheet beneath it. She indicated the upper margin. The red silk repair was made before Christmas, after the lower corner caught against my father's old drawing board. Mrs. Olney saw me mend it. The housekeeper nodded. "I did, Your Grace." Esther moved her finger toward the bypass channel. "This brown line is a correction. The first calculation remains faintly visible beneath it." Nicholas leaned closer, but did not touch the linen. "And Sir Walter's copy." Esther turned copy B until both sheets lay in the same direction. "It repeats the corrected line, but not the first calculation beneath it. Whoever made this sheet copied the result without knowing how it had been reached." Walter planted one gloved hand on the edge of the table, "Or she copied the corrected line from me. Then your sheet should show the earlier line beneath it, not if I redrew it cleanly." Esther looked at the 3 pinholes on copy B. A clean, independent drawing would not reproduce all 3 registration holes in precisely the same positions. Walter's gaze dropped to them. Nicholas noticed. "Explain how that matters." A later sheet laid over original A would be pinned through those fixed points to prevent slipping during tracing. The holes would align. 2 drawings made independently would not carry the same 3 punctures along the same margin. "Unless she traced mine," Walter said. Esther lifted one eyebrow. "Then you must explain how a sheet prepared later contains the earlier paper, the repaired corner, and the buried calculation yours does not. You cannot establish when that silk was sewn. Mrs. Olney can." A servant's memory is hardly. Nicholas turned his head. Finish that sentence carefully, Sir Walter. Walter closed his mouth. Nicholas looked again at original A. May I hold the corner? The question was so ordinary that Esther almost failed to understand its importance. Walter had taken her work. Lady Deborah had taken the key. Nicholas possessed more authority than either of them. Yet he waited before placing one finger upon the linen. Yes, Your Grace. They both reached toward the red silk corner. His fingertips brushed hers. The contact lasted no more than a breath, but both of them stopped. Esther felt the warmth of his hand against skin still chilled from the north room. Nicholas's eyes lifted to hers rather than remaining on the drawing. He withdrew just enough to give her the choice of continuing. She released the corner first. He held it carefully between thumb and forefinger, avoiding the repaired edge. No assumption, no claim, only attention. Walter cleared his throat. Pinholes do not prove conception. Esther steadied her breath. Then let us examine the decision you altered. She indicated the blue arrow on original A. It curved toward the main flue. On copy B, the arrow faced toward the occupied chamber. This direction has been reversed. Lady Deborah drew her shawl closer. It is only an arrow. An arrow tells a workman which way a component must operate. Nicholas lowered the repaired corner with care. I understand that it is different. I do not yet understand the consequence. Walter straightened, as though ignorance from a duke must favor the nearest gentleman. It is a slight adjustment, Your Grace, nothing more. Nicholas did not look at him. Miss Fanshaw, explain it as if I know nothing. Esther placed 2 fingers above the flue lines without touching the ink. The furnace heats water for the pipes beneath the winter garden. That fire also creates smoke. The smoke requires a clear route through the main flue. The damper controls which passage remains open. She traced the safe path through the air. My design directs it away from the floor registers and upward through the flue. Her hand moved to the altered arrow. This version narrows the safe route. If built as drawn, it could force smoke toward the room. Could? Nicholas asked. The result would depend upon draft, fire strength, weather, and the exact component installed. A low fire might appear harmless for a short time. A stronger draw could expose the fault. Walter's expression shifted so briefly that Esther might have missed it had she not been watching him. Nicholas saw it as well. Has the apparatus been installed? He asked. Preparations have begun, Walter said. That was not the question. The work is substantially complete. Esther looked at copy B. Which drawing did the workmen receive? The necessary instructions. Original A or copy B? Walter's patience sharpened. I do not answer to you. No, Nicholas said. You answer to me, because the apparatus stands on my estate. Lady Deborah rose. Your Grace, Walter has invested considerable time and money. A delay would damage his standing before the subscribers. Smoke in a crowded glasshouse would damage more than his standing. Nicholas turned to Esther. Do you know whether this altered direction has been built into the apparatus? No, I had not seen copy B until today. She forced herself not to soften the uncertainty. I can explain my design. I cannot testify to a component I have not inspected. Something in Nicholas's face settled. He respected the limit because she had named it. Then no furnace will be lit, he said. Walter stepped forward. Your Grace, no component will be altered, removed, tested, or replaced. Tomorrow morning, we begin here with the room, the household record, and the history of these drawings. The apparatus at Malvern Court will be inspected only when an independent architect surveyor can attend and see it untouched. You would postpone a ducal demonstration because she claims an arrow belongs to her. I would postpone it because neither smoke nor iron cares whose claim sounds more gentlemanly. Esther almost smiled. The response reached her before caution could stop it. Nicholas saw the beginning of the expression, and one corner of his mouth answered for the briefest instant. Then he looked back at Walter. You will send no new instruction to Malvern Court. You will contact no workman. You will not touch either drawing without permission from its possessor. His final word placed original A exactly where it belonged, with Esther. Walter's face hardened. And if the apparatus is already complete? Nicholas looked at the reversed blue arrow. Then we will discover whether your workman built a garden meant to hold warmth or a room prepared to fill with smoke. At 9 the next morning, Nicholas had not sent a carriage toward Malvern Court. He had postponed the journey until Samuel Wilcox, an independent architect surveyor from Worcester, could witness the apparatus untouched. Instead, Crowther Grange woke beneath a hard white frost to find the Duke of Malvern already in the north corridor. Examining the room Lady Deborah had used as a place of quiet, Esther stood beside him with her father's boxwood folding rule in one hand and original tracing A secured inside her leather portfolio at Mrs. Olney's feet. The cold had left a dull ache in her fingers, but the stiffness was easing. Walter remained near the door, restless beneath the obligation to observe an inquiry he no longer controlled. Lady Deborah sat wrapped in sable near the empty grate, as though the room's discomfort belonged to everyone equally. There was no need to postpone the inspection, Walter said. The work at Malvern Court is already complete. Nicholas looked toward the blocked wall register. That is precisely why it will remain untouched until Mr. Wilcox arrives. You are allowing a household dispute to delay a public commission. I'm allowing evidence to remain evidence. Esther unfolded the boxwood rule and inserted one end through the register slats. It met resistance before reaching the expected depth. The passage narrows less than 8 inches behind the opening. Nicholas crouched near enough to see, but did not take the rule. Because of soot? No, the resistance is flat. Esther shifted the rule left. A wooden panel, warped or badly fitted. Walter folded his arms. Old houses have drafts. That hardly proves anyone intended discomfort. I did not say it proved intention. Esther withdrew the rule. It proves the room receives less warm air than the visible register suggests. Nicholas glanced at her. He had noticed the distinction. She had stated only what the measurement supported. A footman removed the register screws under Mrs. Olney's supervision. Behind the iron face, a narrow oak panel had slipped from its upper fixing and tilted across the passage, reducing the flow by nearly half. Dust lay thick along the lower edge, indicating it had been there for some time. Lady Deborah gave an impatient sigh. Then the room has been neglected. I fail to see how that concerns Walter's apparatus. Esther closed the folding rule at its brass hinge. It concerns the choice to place me here without a fire. You were meant to rest for 1 hour. I was meant to remain until after Walter's showing. Lady Deborah's expression hardened. You insist on making ordinary family discipline sound like persecution. Walter laughed softly. Esther has always had a dramatic understanding of her own importance. She turned toward him. You presented 6 of my working drawings through Father's office. You assisted an invalid parent. No one denied that. The words struck with the old precision. Esther's thumb pressed against the worn brass hinge until its edge marked her skin. For years, Clients had praised improvements they believed came from her father's declining hand. Lady Deborah had called that daughterly devotion. Walter had called it neat copying. Neither had ever asked what it cost to remain useful only while invisible. Nicholas rose. 6 commissions. Esther kept her voice steady. The final working drawings for 6 completed projects. 3 farm cottages near Evesham, a schoolroom outside Pershaw, drainage improvements for a widow's estate near Droitwich, and the service wing at Briar Holt. You designed them. I prepared the measurements, corrected structural inconsistencies, and completed the drawings. My father reviewed what his health allowed. Walter gave a contemptuous shake of his head. She cannot claim authorship because she held the pencil. Nicholas faced him. Name one of the 6 projects. Walter's mouth tightened. I'm not required to recite a catalogue. Name one, the cottages. Where? A pause opened. Walter looked toward Lady Deborah, but she did not answer for him. Near Worcester. Esther said nothing. Nicholas waited. Evesham. Walter said at last, too late. You heard her say it moments ago. Walter flushed. Esther met Nicholas's gaze. For the briefest instant, a restrained smile touched his mouth. The answering warmth in her own face surprised her, not because Walter had failed, but because Nicholas had allowed the silence to expose him. He had not rescued the truth with a speech. He had simply asked a question and waited. Lady Deborah rose from the chair. This has gone far enough. Walter is not an architect by trade. The Duke engaged him because he understands estates, not because he memorizes village names. Then why present the design as his own? Esther asked. Because a gentleman may direct work without drawing every line himself. Direction requires knowing what was directed. Walter stepped into the room. You are determined to shame this family before His Grace. No, I am determined not to be erased for its convenience. Mrs. Olney, who had remained beside the leather portfolio, cleared her throat. Your Grace, there is something else. Lady Deborah turned sharply. Mrs. Olney, you will return to your duties. Nicholas did not raise his voice. She is performing one. The housekeeper's hands tightened around a narrow brown volume she had brought beneath her apron. This is the day book for household instructions. I write most entries myself, but my lady sometimes enters an order directly when she wishes no confusion. Lady Deborah's face became very still. Mrs. Olney opened the book to the page marked with a strip of plain cotton. The ink had browned only slightly. The entry was made yesterday morning. She read aloud. Miss Fanshaw indisposed. North door to remain secured until after the showing. Nicholas held out no hand for the book. Whose writing? Lady Deborah's, Your Grace. You recognize it? I've kept her household accounts for 27 years. Lady Deborah crossed the space between them. That is a private household record. Mrs. Olney closed the daybook before her mistress could take it. It remains under my charge, my lady. The quiet resistance carried more weight than defiance shouted across a room. Lady Deborah looked at the servants, the open register, and Nicholas's expression. I wanted one uninterrupted hour. Walter had prepared for weeks, and Esther was determined to make a scene. I was locked away before I spoke to a single guest, Esther said. You had already taken the drawing. I had taken back my drawing. Nicholas looked toward the daybook. Why did quiet require the door to remain secured only until after the showing? Lady Deborah's lips parted, then closed. Walter intervened, because Esther would have confused the issue before anyone understood the design. By naming who made it, Esther asked, by insisting upon a distinction no subscriber would care about. The answer revealed more than Walter intended. Nicholas's gaze sharpened. I care about it. A knock sounded from the corridor. The footman opened the door to admit a young messenger in Malvern livery, cheeks reddened from the cold. He bowed and handed a sealed note to Nicholas. From the estate steward, Your Grace. He was told it required an immediate answer. Nicholas broke the seal and read. His expression changed before he reached the final line. The apparatus has been fully installed, he said. Walter's eyes flickered. Esther felt the ache leave her fingers beneath a colder sensation. Nicholas continued. A furnace technician hired in Worcester by Sir Walter is already at Malvern Court. He has asked twice for permission to load fuel and begin a low-fire trial. A standard precaution, Walter said quickly. The man cannot judge the apparatus without heat. He will not judge it. Nicholas crossed to the writing desk. The estate staff have obeyed my prohibition. No fuel has been loaded. He wrote 3 short lines, sanded the ink, and folded the sheet. Take this to the steward. No one enters the undercroft. No bolt, plate, seal, or length of pipe is to be touched. The technician is to remain above ground or leave the estate. The messenger accepted the note. Yes, Your Grace, ride carefully, there is ice under the east lane. When the door closed, Walter said, You are treating a tradesman like a criminal. I am treating an installed mechanism like disputed evidence. Nicholas returned to Esther. Mr. Wilcox can reach Crowther Grange by the 16th. We will travel to Malvern Court on the 17th. Esther nodded. That is sufficient, provided nothing is altered. Nothing will be. Walter's laugh carried no amusement. You place remarkable faith in a woman who has offered nothing but family grievance. Esther reached down and lifted her leather portfolio. Original A remained secured inside, beyond Walter's reach. Then you should welcome an inspection. He looked at her with open dislike. Perhaps I do. The answer was too smooth. Esther remembered the reversed arrow, the installed apparatus, and the technician waiting beside an unlit furnace. Walter had not objected because he feared what the inspection might find. He had objected because something had already been prepared. And every hour Nicholas delayed the fire gave Esther another chance to discover what it was. On the 17th of January, Esther left Crowther Grange in a closed carriage with Mrs. Olney seated opposite her and original tracing A secured inside the locked leather portfolio beside her boots. The road to Malvern Court had hardened beneath several nights of frost. Hedgerows stood black against the pale fields, and the carriage wheels struck frozen ruts with enough force to make the brass fittings tremble. Esther kept one gloved hand on the portfolio whenever the road dipped. Mrs. Olney watched her without comment until Crowther Grange had disappeared behind the winter trees. You slept very little, the housekeeper said. Enough, that means no. Esther looked through the window at a stand of bare oaks. I kept thinking of the technician waiting beside the furnace. His Grace ordered him away from the undercroft. Walter ordered the apparatus built before anyone independent saw the drawing. He will not have left everything to obedience. Mrs. Olney's mouth tightened. No, he rarely leaves anything to chance unless another person will suffer for it. The words carried no servant's spite. Mrs. Olney had managed the Crowther household for 27 years. She knew the difference between Walter's carelessness and his preparation. When the carriage entered Malvern Court's eastern drive, Esther saw the winter garden rising beyond the main house. Its glass roof caught the cold sunlight and broke it into hard white lines. The structure was larger than she had imagined from the estate measurements. Iron ribs arched over tiled walks and dormant beds prepared for winter exhibitions. Beneath that elegance lay the furnace chamber, the pipes, and the damper whose direction no one had yet verified. Nicholas waited near the service entrance with a lean, grey-haired gentleman in a dark travelling coat. He did not open the carriage door himself. A footman performed the duty while Nicholas remained at a respectful distance. Esther descended without assistance, then turned to ensure Mrs. Olney had firm footing. "Miss Fanshaw," Nicholas said. "Mrs. Olney. May I present Mr. Samuel Wilcox of Worcester, architect and surveyor." Wilcox bowed. "I've been retained to examine the apparatus and the records attached to it. His Grace has agreed in writing that my findings will be entered without alteration." Esther at Nicholas. Esther looked at Nicholas. "And if I disagree with one of Mr. Wilcox's measurements?" "You will say so," Nicholas replied. Wilcox added, "And I'll measure again in your presence." That answer mattered more than politeness. Esther inclined her head. "Then we understand one another." The estate steward met them inside the service passage and confirmed that no fire had been lit, no access panel opened, and no workman admitted below since Nicholas's order. Walter's hired technician had left Malvern Court on the 13th, after protesting that he could not guarantee the apparatus unless permitted a low-fire trial. The technician's tools remained locked in a storeroom under the steward's seal. Walter had sent 2 letters requesting their release. Both had been refused. Esther listened carefully. None of it proved innocence or guilt, but it preserved the physical state she needed. Wilcox led them into the winter garden. The air beneath the glass was colder than the house, but still, carrying the faint mineral scent of damp tile and iron. Floor registers ran between the central beds. Esther crouched beside one and examined its orientation. "The warming pipes carry heated water beneath the walks," she said. "The furnace creates the heat, but the fire also creates smoke. The damper decides which passage remains open to that smoke." Nicholas stood beside her, listening without pretending knowledge. "And the floor registers? They admit warmed air from the channels below. They must never become the path of least resistance for the smoke." Wilcox unfolded his site notebook. "We'll inspect the housing from the undercroft, but nothing will be opened today if Sir Walter's seal remains intact." Esther nodded. "Exterior measurements first." The undercroft stair descended behind a narrow iron door near the western wall. Condensation had frozen along the upper rail. Esther placed one foot on the first grated step and felt the sole of her boot slide a fraction. Nicholas moved beside her but did not take her arm. He extended his hand, palm open. "The rail is cold. My hand is available, if you wish it." The choice rested plainly between them. Esther looked at his hand, then at the steep iron steps disappearing beneath the glass house. She placed her gloved fingers in his. His grasp closed firmly enough to steady, not enough to direct. They descended one step at a time. The warmth of his palm came through both pairs of gloves, quiet and contained. He did not pull her ahead of Mrs. Olney or place himself between Esther and the apparatus. When she reached the stone landing, she released him. He released her at once. The contact had lasted perhaps 10 seconds. It remained with her longer. Wilcox came down behind them, carrying a measuring rod and lantern. The undercroft smelled of brick dust, cold metal, and unused coal. Pipes ran overhead toward the winter garden floor. At the far wall stood the damper housing, set into new brickwork that differed in color from the older chamber. A strip of red wax crossed the access plate. Walter's impressed initials remained visible in it. "Seal intact," Wilcox said. The estate steward confirmed it. Esther set her leather portfolio upon a dry wooden bench. She unlocked it herself, removed original A, and handed the tracing directly to Wilcox. For comparison only. Of course. He placed it on a clean drawing board supported by trestles. Esther remained beside him while he measured the drawn housing. 22 inches across. The installed brick recess measured 24. Wilcox checked twice, 2 inches wider. Esther looked at the iron plate, and the fastenings do not match. Original A specified 2 centered bolts. The installed plate had 3. The third sat left of center, close to where the offset spindle would emerge if Walter's altered assembly had been built. Wilcox marked each measurement in his notebook and asked Esther to verify the figures before he proceeded. She did. Nicholas stood behind the line of work, close enough to hear but not close enough to crowd her shoulder. "Can a wider housing be harmless?" he asked. "It could be," Esther said, "if the internal component were redesigned safely around it, and if it were not, then width and spindle position might force the plate across the bypass channel." Wilcox crouched near the access plate without touching the wax. "We cannot know the internal orientation without breaking this seal." "Not yet," Esther said. "We need the foundry order and the carpenter's measurements first. Otherwise, Walter can claim the housing was altered after installation." Nicholas nodded. "Then the seal remains." Wilcox finished the exterior survey and returned original A to Esther. She checked the red silk repair, the pinholes, and the brown ink correction before placing the tracing back inside her portfolio and locking it. No one else touched it. Above them, the winter garden remained silent. No warm air moved through the registers. No smoke exposed the fault. The apparatus held its answer behind Walter's wax. As they climbed the stair, Nicholas again offered his hand without speaking. Esther accepted for the steepest 3 steps and released it when the upper landing widened. This time the contact felt less surprising, though no less deliberate. They stood beneath the glass roof while Wilcox summarized his preliminary findings. The housing differed from original A. The third fastening suggested an offset internal component. The seal prevented full inspection. Independent records were required before opening. Nicholas turned to Esther. "If the safe design is proved to be yours, do you wish to complete the commission?" The question struck more deeply than she expected. Walter had treated completion as his right. Lady Deborah had treated Esther's labor as family duty. Nicholas asked as though refusal remained possible even if victory came. "I haven't decided." "Then no one will decide for you." Esther met his gaze. For a moment the cold structure around them seemed to hold not absence but space. A steward's clerk hurried into the winter garden carrying a folded notice. "Your Grace, this was delivered from Crowther Grange." Nicholas read it. His expression sharpened. "Sir Walter has sent invitations to the county subscribers." Wilcox looked up. "For what date?" "The 24th. Esther counted silently. 7 days. "Has he described it as a trial, as a public demonstration of his completed apparatus?" Nicholas folded the notice once. "He has no permission." Esther looked toward the floor registers and the sealed chamber beneath them. "He may not need permission if enough people arrive expecting warmth." Nicholas's gaze followed hers. Behind the polished glass and iron, Walter's altered work waited in silence, while every invitation already traveling across Worcestershire promised that the machine belonged to him. On the 20th of January, the road into Worcester shone with thawing frost, and Esther watched the cathedral tower appear beyond the roofs while the carriage carried her Mrs. Olney, Nicholas, and Samuel Wilcox toward Reeve and Sons Ironworks. Original Tracing A remained locked inside Esther's leather portfolio beneath her hand. Wilcox carried only his measurements from Malvern Court, copied in his notebook and signed by the estate steward. No original drawing had left Esther's possession. The foundry stood near the river, its yard blackened by coal dust and lined with stacked iron. Inside, hammer blows rang beneath the rafters. Mr. Reeve met them in his counting room, a square-built man with grey at his temples and burn marks on one cuff. He bowed to Nicholas, then looked uneasily at Esther. "I was told this concerned Sir Walter's order." "It concerns the apparatus built from that order," Wilcox said. "We need the ledger entry, the delivery ticket, and any instruction given outside the written specification." Reeve glanced toward Nicholas. "Your Grace, I don't wish to accuse a gentleman." "Then accuse no one," Nicholas replied. "State what you saw, what you made, and what was asked of you." Reeve unlocked a cabinet and brought out a bound ledger. He placed it on the table, opened to the December entries, and kept one hand on the page. "The original remains here, as it should," Wilcox said. He read the entry aloud. On the 29th of December, Sir Walter Crowther had ordered a left-handed damper assembly for the Malvern Winter Garden, 24 inches across, with an offset spindle and a blue directional mark to face outward when mounted. Walter's signature stood beneath the specification. Esther leaned closer without touching the page. The measurements matched the widened housing beneath the glass house. "Was a drawing supplied?" she asked. "A clean tracing," Reeve said. "No red repair, blue marks, initials at the bottom." Copy B. Esther felt anger move through her, but the fact mattered more. "Did you retain it?" "No." Sir Walter took it away after approval. Wilcox recorded the answer. Reeve turned several pages and produced a delivery work ticket fastened into the ledger. The assembly was completed first. 2 days later, Sir Walter sent instructions that the brick recess should be widened to receive it. The ticket specified an additional 2 inches and a third fastening left of center. Esther looked at Nicholas. "That third fastening sits near the offset spindle," he said. Then he turned to her. "Close to the bypass correction you showed me." The exactness of his memory startled her more than praise would have done. Many men remembered that she had spoken. Nicholas remembered what she had said. She met his gaze for a breath. "Yes," she said. "If the plate travels across that space, it narrows the safe passage." Reeve's expression tightened. I questioned the direction. Wilcox stopped writing. "When? Before we cast the plate." A left-handed assembly was unusual for the plan as I understood it. I asked whether the mark had been reversed. Esther's fingers closed around the portfolio handle. "What did Sir Walter say?" "That the flue at Malvern had been altered, and the plate must close from the opposite side." "Did he say why?" Reeve hesitated. "He asked whether a low fire might still appear to draw properly for a few minutes." No one moved. Nicholas spoke first. "Your answer?" "I told him it might. With a low fire, little smoke, and calm air, a poor draught can seem adequate. Once the fire strengthens, or wind changes the pressure against a glass structure, the fault shows itself." Esther pictured the winter garden beneath the winter sky. And then, he asked how long before smoke returned. Reeve rubbed one thumb along the ticket. I said there was no honest way to promise. 5 minutes, perhaps 10, less in hard wind. Wilcox's pen moved steadily. How did Sir Walter respond? He said a short demonstration was all he required. Nicholas's face became unreadable. "You supplied the assembly despite that?" "The order was signed." "He stated The estate flue had been altered. I had no authority to inspect a ducal property. Esther asked. Did he mention my name? No. Did he show you any earlier calculation? No. Did he ask you to mark the finished component? Reeve nodded. Our foundry mark is beneath the spindle collar. The blue arrow was painted on the outer face before delivery. Wilcox copied the description and the location of each record. I will request certified extracts. The originals remain here. Nicholas looked toward Esther. Does this prove intention? It proves he ordered the alteration and asked about delayed failure. She kept her answer precise. It does not yet prove why he wanted it, but it tells us what to ask next. Yes, Reeve shifted uneasily. There is one more thing. The carpenter who widened the recess objected to the third fastening. Sir Walter told him the change came from Malvern Court. Wilcox closed his notebook. Name? Reeve gave it. I will obtain his statement separately. When they returned to Crowther Grange near dusk, Lady Deborah was waiting in the small drawing room with Walter beside the mantel and a prepared paper on the writing desk. Mrs. Olney remained near the door. Nicholas and Wilcox stood back while Lady Deborah pushed the paper toward Esther. This ends the difficulty. Walter will acknowledge that you prepared the drawings. You will acknowledge him as designer. The Duke's commission proceeds, and no one outside this room need hear of the rest. Esther read the wording. Sir Walter Crowther, designer. Miss Esther Fanshaw, draftswoman. It reduced conception, calculation, and correction to the neat movement of her hand. No. Lady Deborah's expression did not change. You haven't considered what refusal will cost. I have considered what acceptance would cost. Walter stepped away from the fire. You copied lines for your father. You copied lines for me. You have mistaken repetition for invention. Esther set the paper back. Then explain why you asked Mr. Reeve how long an unsafe draft might appear to work. For an instant, Walter's confidence broke. Then he smiled. Foundrymen enjoy making themselves important. The order carries your signature, Wilcox said. The delivery ticket carries your dimensions. Walter's gaze moved to Nicholas. Every construction requires adjustment. A safe adjustment does not require asking how long failure will remain hidden, Nicholas replied. Lady Deborah's voice sharpened. You are all assuming the worst, because Esther has made a grievance fashionable. Esther looked toward Walter's presentation case near the escritoire. Its brass clasp stood open. Inside lay copy B, rolled and tied, ready for the demonstration he still intended to give. Why is that drawing prepared? She asked. Walter followed her gaze. Because the subscribers will attend on the 24th. His Grace has not authorized a trial. They have been invited. Walter lifted the roll. Once they see the apparatus work, this inquiry will end. And if it fails? Esther asked. His hand tightened around copy B. Then we will know who altered the design. The answer came too quickly. Esther understood why the initials EF had been copied so carefully, and why Walter had asked how long a defect might remain invisible. He expected the machine to behave long enough for applause. If it failed later, he already held the woman he meant to blame. Nicholas saw the realization in her face. The trial will not proceed, he said. Walter's smile returned, smooth and empty. We shall see, Your Grace. Outside, the winter wind rose against the windows. At Malvern Court, a sealed apparatus waited beneath glass, built to offer warmth for a few convincing minutes before the smoke chose another path. By noon on the 24th of January, the Malvern Winter Garden was full of people who believed they had come to witness success. County subscribers moved beneath the glass roof in dark coats and winter silks, speaking with the confidence of those who expected an agreeable novelty before luncheon. Frost clung to the outer panes, and the tiled walks held a cold that no apparatus had yet disturbed. Esther stood near the central register with Mrs. Olney beside her and original tracing A, locked inside the leather portfolio at the housekeeper's feet. Samuel Wilcox had begun checking the estate seals against his notebook. Nicholas stood at the front of the gathering, his expression controlled but unmistakably displeased. Walter had invited nearly 30 people without permission. Lady Deborah had greeted each one as though the Duke himself had arranged the occasion. "There will be no demonstration," Nicholas said. His voice carried easily beneath the glass. "Mr. Wilcox has not completed his inspection. No fire is to be lit." A murmur passed through the guests. Walter stepped forward with a rolled drawing beneath one arm and a small brass handbell resting on the presentation table behind him. "Your Grace, the apparatus was commissioned for public benefit. A low fire presents no danger. You asked the founder how long an unsafe draft might appear to work." Walter's face tightened. Mr. Reeve misunderstood a technical question. "Then you will have an opportunity to correct him after the apparatus is independently examined." Wilcox crouched near the western access stair and compared the wax impression on the outer door with the sketch in his notebook. "First seal intact," he said. The estate steward repeated the number for the record. Below them, beyond the closed undercroft door, no estate servant waited near the furnace. Nicholas had removed the Malvern stoker from the chamber and ordered all fuel locked away. What no one yet knew was that Walter's hired Worcester technician had returned before dawn with a folded instruction bearing the estate steward's copied signature. The man had entered through the eastern coal passage before the household was fully awake. Walter had told him to remain below, load only a small measure of fuel, and begin when he heard the handbell. The technician believed the order authorized a private low-fire test. He could not hear the Duke speaking through brick, iron, and the winter garden floor. Esther watched Walter's right hand. It rested too near the bell. His left arm held copy B against his side, ready rather than merely present. "Sir Walter," she said, "step away from the table." Several heads turned. He smiled. "You don't direct this gathering." "No, but I recognize preparation." Nicholas followed her gaze to the bell. "Do not touch it." For a single instant, Walter looked almost amused. Then he reached back and struck the bell once. The bright note rang through the glass house. Nicholas moved at once. "Steward, open the undercroft. Stop the fire." The steward and 2 footmen hurried toward the western stair, but below them iron scraped against brick. A low mechanical groan traveled beneath the tiles. The first fire had already been laid. Walter raised both hands in practiced innocence. "A small trial, Your Grace. Nothing more." "Who is below?" "A competent technician." "Under whose authority?" Walter did not answer. Esther felt the floor beneath her boot vibrate faintly as cold pipes began to respond to rising heat. Wilcox abandoned the seal count and knelt beside the nearest register. "There's draft movement." "Toward the flue?" Esther asked. He held a narrow strip of paper over the opening. It lifted weakly, then trembled sideways, not steadily. Walter turned to the subscribers. "As you see, the system is beginning exactly as intended. Warm air requires several minutes to circulate." The first faint warmth reached the register. A few guests leaned closer. Someone near the back gave an appreciative hum. Walter had expected this. Esther saw it in the way his shoulders eased. A low fire, a brief appearance of success. Enough time for him to speak before the fault revealed itself. He unrolled copy B on the table. The arrangement combines heated water channels with an improved directional damper. The principle is mine, developed specifically for the Malvern structure. Nicholas did not look at him. Clear the eastern doors, he ordered. No one remains near the registers. A footman opened the nearest glass door. Winter air rushed inside. The change in pressure came sharply. The paper strip above the register flattened, then snapped downward. Esther heard Wilcox swear under his breath. The draft has reversed. A dull cough sounded from beneath the floor. Then grey smoke curled through the register beside Walter's table. It rose in a narrow thread at first, almost delicate against the white winter light. A stronger gust struck the glasshouse. Smoke poured upward. Guests recoiled. Several women covered their mouths with handkerchiefs. A gentleman near the central bed began coughing as servants guided him toward the open doors. Mrs. Olney seized the leather portfolio and moved with Esther. But Esther stopped long enough to point toward the western register. "Keep that door open. Do not let anyone cross the center aisle." Nicholas heard her and repeated the order. Footman directed the subscribers out without panic. No one fell. No flame entered the garden. Within minutes, the space was nearly empty, except for principals, servants, and a haze gathering beneath the iron ribs. Walter remained beside the table, his eyes watering, but his composure intact, too intact. He had lost the brief success he intended, but he had prepared for failure. He lifted copy B high enough for those still near the doors to see. This drawing bears Miss Fanshaw's initials. Esther felt every gaze turn. Walter pointed to the reversed blue arrow. She altered the damper direction. She knew the apparatus would fail. "That is false," Esther said. Lady Deborah drew her shawl over her mouth and looked toward the retreating subscribers. "Esther has resented Walter's commission from the beginning. She took the original drawing. She interfered with the household. Now this." One of the women who had praised Walter on arrival lowered her eyes rather than meet Esther's. Another allowed her companion to guide her through the door without waiting to hear an answer. The humiliation was quieter than mockery and more complete. Society was already choosing the version that required less discomfort. Wilcox crossed to the presentation table. "Miss Fanshaw had no access to the sealed housing. I had not completed inspection when the fire was started." Walter tapped copy B with one finger. "Her initials remain." "Because you copied them," Esther said. Nicholas stepped between Walter and the gathering. Anger had stripped restraint from his voice. "Miss Fanshaw designed the original arrangement. Her papers are now under my protection. No one will question her further without my permission." Esther turned toward him. He did not see the danger in his words because he believed he was ending hers. "Mr. Wilcox," Nicholas continued, "take both tracings to my study. They will remain there until I decide how this inquiry proceeds." "No." Esther's voice stopped him more effectively than a shout. Nicholas looked at her. She placed one hand on the leather portfolio Mrs. Olney still held. "Original A is mine. It will not enter your study." His expression shifted. "I am trying to prevent Walter from reaching it by placing it where only another gentleman decides who may touch it." "That is not what I mean. It is what you have done." Around them, smoke thinned beneath the open doors, but several subscribers had paused outside within hearing. Esther saw the public shape of the moment with terrible clarity. Walter had claimed her work because he believed his name gave it value. Nicholas now claimed authority over that same work because he believed his title could make it safe. "You have not returned my work to me," she said. "You have merely changed the gentleman whose name stands over it." Nicholas went still. Esther continued before grief could weaken precision. "You named me without permission. You declared what I may be asked and who may ask it. You turned my authorship into something protected by your favor." "Esther." He took one step toward her, then stopped when she moved back. His hand lifted but never touched her. "I was wrong to order the transfer," he said. "Then do not repair it with another order." She looked at Wilcox. "You may take custody of copy B under a written receipt. Original A remains with me." Wilcox nodded. Esther turned to Nicholas. "I withdraw from any inquiry whose terms are decided for me." The words cost more than leaving Walter unchallenged, because this time she was walking away from the man who had first opened the door. She chose it anyway. Mrs. Olney held the portfolio close as they crossed the tiled floor and passed through the eastern exit. Nicholas did not follow. He did not command the carriage stopped or ask Esther to remain for his explanation. Later, in his study, copy B lay on the desk where Wilcox had placed it temporarily under signed note. Original A was not beside it. Nicholas stood alone with an unused ducal seal in his palm, and understood that Esther had escaped one locked room only to find him building another around her name. On the morning of the 25th of January, Esther sat in the front parlor of a modest Worcester lodging, with original tracing A locked inside the leather portfolio beside her chair. Mrs. Olney had placed a small coal fire in the grate, though Esther's throat still carried a faint roughness from the smoke at Malvern Court. The irritation was already easing. What remained was not physical. It was the memory of Nicholas standing before the subscribers and turning her name into something guarded by his permission. Mrs. Avery, the landlady, entered shortly after 11 with a silver tray and a single calling card. "The Duke of Malvern is waiting outside, miss." Esther looked toward the window. A hired carriage stood across the narrow street rather than a ducal coach. No crest marked the door. No outrider occupied the curb. Did he send a message? Only that card? He said he would remain in the carriage unless you chose to receive him. Mrs. Olney watched Esther carefully. "You owe him nothing." "I know." Esther turned the card once beneath her fingers. Nicholas had not sent flowers that might require thanks, a letter that could shape her answer before he faced her, or a servant instructed to insist upon his rank. He had made himself available and left the decision where it belonged. "Mrs. Avery, please show him in." "The parlor door is to remain open, of course, and remain within hearing." Mrs. Avery gave a brisk nod. When Nicholas entered, he carried no gift. A flat document case rested beneath one arm. He bowed first to Esther, then to Mrs. Olney and Mrs. Avery. "Thank you for receiving me." Esther indicated the chair opposite the writing table. "You may sit." He waited until she had taken her own seat before doing so. The open doorway revealed Mrs. Avery's small dining room beyond, where the landlady settled with her mending. Mrs. Olney remained near the hearth. Nicholas placed the document case on the table, but did not open it. "Before I say anything personal, there are facts that belong to you." Esther said nothing. He untied the case and withdrew 3 papers. "Mr. Wilcox removed copy B from my study last night. He placed it in his own locked evidence case and carried it to his Worcester office under a signed receipt. It was not opened, marked, copied, or examined while it remained in my house." He laid down the first sheet. It described the drawing, the blue arrow, the initials EF, the visible pinholes, and the condition of the waxed linen. Esther read the signature at the bottom. Samuel Wilcox. Beneath it stood the name of the Malvern estate steward as witness. Nicholas placed a second paper beside it. This confirms that original tracing A never entered my custody or my study. It remained with you when you left the winter garden. Esther read every line. The statement did not pretend that Nicholas was returning something he had never possessed. "And the third?" she asked. "A copy of the notice sent this morning to every subscriber who attended yesterday." He moved it toward her. The wording was brief. The trial had begun before Mr. Wilcox completed his inspection, and contrary to the Duke's direction, Miss Esther Fanshaw had possessed no access to the sealed housing or furnace chamber. No technical conclusion regarding authorship or responsibility had been reached. Esther looked up. "You did not name Walter responsible. The evidence has not yet completed that task. You did not name me designer. You had not given me permission." The distinction tightened something in her chest. Nicholas folded his hands loosely before him. "I came to apologize, not to explain why I acted. Explanation would only ask you to weigh my intention against the injury." Esther held his gaze. "Then name the injury." "I declared your authorship before you chose how it would be presented. I claimed authority over papers that were not mine. I told a room full of people that they required my permission to question you, as though your voice became legitimate only after I stood in front of it." His expression did not seek mercy. "Walter used his name to take your work. I used mine to control the truth about it. I called that protection. It was not." The fire settled behind Mrs. Olney with a quiet fall of coal. Esther had expected remorse. She had not expected precision. "You frightened me," she said. Nicholas's composure shifted, not dramatically, but enough for her to see the pain land. "I know. No, you know now." "Yes. When Walter held the copy, I understood what he wanted. Credit, influence, your commission. When you spoke, I did not know where my own work would be taken next, or whether I would have to fight you to get it back. You should never have needed to wonder, but I did. Yes." He did not soften the word. "And I cannot ask you to trust me, because I have finally understood what I should have understood before acting." Esther looked down at Wilcox's inventory. "What do you want?" "To return the inquiry to terms you choose. If you refuse to continue, I will not pursue you. If you continue, not decides the structure." "And Walter?" "He will have access only through the same recorded process as everyone else. No private examination in your study. No, Mr. Wilcox controls both evidence files." "Yes. Every transfer is written and witnessed." "Yes. I determine the order in which the technical facts are presented." "Yes. No announcement of guilt before the physical apparatus and records have been examined." Nicholas inclined his head. "Agreed," Esther continued. "The design remains mine, whether I complete the commission, refuse it, or never draw another line for Malvern Court." "Agreed. And if you believe there is danger, you tell me. You do not remove me from the inquiry for my own good. I will tell you. You may advise, yes. You may not decide for me." "No." The answers came without hesitation, but not with impatience. Nicholas was not rushing toward forgiveness. He was accepting limits, one by one. Esther placed the 3 papers in front of her and aligned their edges. "I have one final condition." "Name it. If you fail again, I will tell you." Something quiet and unguarded entered his face. He placed one hand on the table between them, palm upward. He did not reach across the space. He did not ask her to take it. "You must," he said. Esther looked at the open hand. Part of her remembered the iron stare at Malvern Court, His steady grasp offered, without assumption. Another part remembered him standing beneath smoke and taking command of her name. Trust did not erase either memory. It required holding both. She moved her hand across the table and placed it in his. Nicholas's fingers closed slowly around hers. The contact was warm, sustained, and entirely still. He did not lift her hand or draw her nearer. Esther kept her own fingers around his while she said, "I am not forgiving you today. I understand. Do you? I believe you when you say the harm remains. I will not ask, feeling to move faster than evidence." Esther watched him absorb the boundary rather than resist it. "Then perhaps you have understood part of it." His thumb moved once against the side of her hand, a small acknowledgement rather than a caress. They remained joined for several breaths. Esther was the one who released him, and Nicholas allowed the contact to end without trying to preserve it. Mrs. Avery appeared at the open door, holding a newly delivered envelope. This came by hand for Miss Fanshaw. Esther recognized Walter's seal. She opened the envelope and unfolded a printed circular addressed to county households. Sir Walter Crowther regretted that an embittered copyist had endangered a gathering at Malvern Court in pursuit of recognition she had not earned. The circular claimed Esther had altered technical instructions, manipulated the Duke's sympathy, and now sought to destroy a gentleman's reputation. At the bottom, Walter invited any subscriber who valued truth to reject further scandal. Mrs. Olney read over Esther's shoulder, her face tightening with outrage. Nicholas did not demand the paper. "May I see it?" he asked. Esther handed it to him. He read every line, then returned it. "He wants you to defend your character instead of proving the design." Esther folded the circular along its printer's crease. "Then I will not answer the insult." Nicholas waited. Esther placed Walter's circular beside the corrected notice and Wilcox's inventory. "I will ask questions he cannot survive by charm alone." On the 28th of January, Esther carried original tracing A into Samuel Wilcox's Worcester office beneath her own arm. Mrs. Olney walked beside her. Copy B had already been removed from Nicholas's study and placed inside Wilcox's locked evidence cabinet under signed receipt. Esther's original remained in the leather portfolio she had guarded since Crowther Grange. Before either drawing entered the same light, she sat at the work table and answered Walter's circular. She did not defend her temperament, deny envy, or ask county society to consider her respectable. She wrote 4 questions. Which drawing had been made first? Who had ordered the altered damper? Who had instructed the workmen to widen the housing? Why had Miss Esther Fanshaw been locked away during Sir Walter Crowther's first showing? Beneath them, she signed her full name. Wilcox read the page only after she pushed it toward him. "You haven't answered a single insult," he said. "An insult is designed to make me prove I deserve a hearing," Esther replied. "These questions require him to prove what he did." Wilcox called in his clerk and closed the inner door. "Then we begin with custody." He opened the cabinet in their presence. The paper seal across its brass latch bore his initials, the date, and the estate steward's witness mark. He read them aloud, broke the seal, and removed copy B without unfolding it. A prepared receipt described the waxed linen, the initials EF, the visible pinholes, the blue directional arrow, and the condition in which the drawing had left Malvern Court. Esther read every line. Only then did she unlock her portfolio. Original A emerged with its red silk repair intact, the brown correction near the bypass channel, and the 3 registration pinholes along the upper margin. Wilcox prepared a separate receipt. "This remains your property," he said. "I accept temporary custody for comparison, preservation, and the public inquiry. It will not leave my control without a recorded transfer." Esther corrected one phrase. "Right, that it will not leave your control without my written authorization or an order of a court with lawful jurisdiction." Wilcox amended the receipt. Better. She signed only after the alteration dried. He signed both copies and gave one to her. Original A passed directly from Esther's hands to his. No one else touched it. Wilcox spread the drawings over clean glass beneath the north window. He aligned the upper edges, then placed 3 fine brass pins through the registration holes. Each pin entered both sheets without resistance. "The holes correspond exactly," he said. He lifted the layered tracings toward the pale winter light. Copy B settled over Esther's corrected geometry. Small hesitations appeared where the later hand had followed lines it had not calculated. Wilcox moved the lower margin into stronger light. A faint maker's mark emerged in copy B. Harland & Sons, 1852 issue. Esther looked at original A. Its paper bore the earlier 1851 mark her father had purchased before his death. Wilcox compared the manufacturer's circular he had obtained that morning. This mold entered use on the 2nd of January. Copy B cannot predate that day. Mrs. Olney stepped nearer without touching the glass. The red silk was already on Miss Fanshaw's drawing before Christmas. "I saw her mend it." "You will state that under signature?" Wilcox asked. "I will state it before every gentleman in Worcestershire if needed." The watermark did not prove who had reversed the arrow, but it destroyed Walter's claim that copy B had come first. One question had begun to answer itself. Wilcox placed both tracings in separate sleeves before opening a second evidence file. Mr. Reeves' original foundry order remained in the Worcester ledger, but a certified copy now lay before them. It bore Walter's signature, the left-handed assembly specification, the 24-inch width, and the outward-facing blue mark. A certified extract from the foundry delivery work ticket recorded the widened housing and third fastening. Beside it lay a different document, signed by the carpenter who had altered the brick recess. His statement confirmed that Walter personally instructed him to widen the opening by 2 inches and add the fastening left of center. Esther checked each description against Wilcox's Malvern notes. "Keep the ticket and the statement separate," she said. "One proves what was delivered. The other proves who directed the masonry." "Agreed." Mrs. Olney then placed the housekeeper's daybook on the table, wrapped in plain linen. Wilcox prepared another receipt before she untied it. The original entry in Lady Deborah's hand remained clear. Miss Fanshaw indisposed. North door to remain secured until after the showing. Mrs. Olney signed the transfer. "That book belongs to Crowther Grange," she said. "It does not belong to Lady Deborah's convenience." By early afternoon, a messenger arrived from Malvern Court with the estate steward's report. Every Undercroft entrance had been secured with numbered wax seals. Walter's altered damper remained installed inside the housing. No bolt had been loosened. Wilcox read each seal number aloud while his clerk entered it beside the site sketch. Esther authorized the next step. A second damper would be fabricated from original A under Wilcox's supervision. It would be marked Comparison A, measured before witnesses, and sealed separately. It would not be fitted or tested until the public examination. 2 pieces of iron, Esther said. 1 built from Walter's order, 1 built from my design. Let the same room answer both. A quiet knock came from the outer office. The clerk returned. His Grace is waiting in the corridor. Wilcox looked at Esther. He has been there since noon. He asked that no message be sent in until the transfers were complete. Esther glanced at the receipts, separate evidence sleeves, and daybook now held under independent custody. Nicholas had arrived on time and remained outside the room whose boundaries she had established. "You may admit him." Nicholas entered, but stopped just beyond the threshold. His gaze went first to Esther. "May I come farther?" She crossed to him. With 2 fingers, she touched the inside of his wrist and guided him to the side of the table. The contact was brief, chosen, and unmistakably hers. "Stand here," she said, "beside me." "Yes." He remained where she placed him while Wilcox explained the receipts, watermark, certified records, and planned fabrication of Comparison A. Nicholas asked no question until Esther had finished. Then he said, "Malvern Court will provide access, workmen, fuel, and witnesses according to your written sequence. Nothing will be opened before you authorize it." Esther inclined her head. "That is what I require." Mrs. Olney drew a folded letter from her reticule. "There is one more record." The paper bore Lady Deborah's hand. It offered Mrs. Olney a comfortable pension and a favorable reference if she withdrew her statement about the daybook. "Was money enclosed?" Wilcox asked. "No, only a promise if I agreed before the inquiry." Mrs. Olney's fingers tightened around the edge. "Sir Walter also drafted an order dismissing me the morning after the failed trial. It was never served because I left Crowther Grange with Miss Fanshaw." She looked toward Esther. "At 53, a housekeeper without a reference doesn't simply walk into another respectable household." Nicholas's expression hardened, but he did not speak for her. Mrs. Olney placed the letter before Wilcox. "Record it." Esther saw the cost beneath the steadiness. Mrs. Olney was risking income, standing, and the only profession she had practiced for 27 years. Wilcox prepared the final receipt. When Mrs. Olney signed, her hand did not tremble. Outside the north window, winter light faded over a Worcester. Inside, Walter's accusations had begun to lose their shape. The inquiry no longer depended upon whether society found Esther sympathetic. It rested upon paper made in different years, iron ordered to different dimensions, a room secured for a showing, and a witness who had chosen truth without any guarantee it would reward her. On the 3rd of February, Esther worked in a temporary drawing room at Malvern Court, while winter rain moved in thin grey lines across the windows. Samuel Wilcox had brought measured copies of the relevant plans from Worcester, but original tracing A and copy B remained sealed inside his locked evidence case near the far wall. The newly commissioned comparison. A damper was being fabricated under his supervision at Reeve & Sons, its dimensions taken from Esther's safe design and recorded before any iron was cast. Mrs. Olney sat in the adjoining room with the connecting door open, sorting copied correspondence beside the estate steward. Nicholas occupied a chair at the side of Esther's table rather than its head. He had not chosen the place for effect. He had simply remembered where she had placed him. Esther marked the altered housing width on a fresh sheet. "The offset spindle does more than reverse the plate," she said. "It pushes the closing edge across the bypass channel before the main flue has opened fully." Nicholas leaned closer without touching the paper. "So Walter's assembly can seem harmless while the fire remains low." "Yes, the first smoke is slight. The room may warm enough to impress people before pressure changes. And once the fire strengthens, the safest route narrows. Smoke finds the next available passage." He looked through the glass toward the winter garden. where numbered seals remained undisturbed. The floor registers. Exactly. Wilcox, working at a smaller desk, glanced up. Mr. Reeve has promised comparison A by the 10th. I will inspect the mold before casting and place my mark beneath the centered collar. Esther nodded. The altered assembly and comparison A must never be stored together without separate labels and seals. They won't be, Nicholas asked. Would a public audience understand the difference if both pieces were shown side by side? Esther considered. They will understand width. They will understand a centered spindle beside an offset one. Most importantly, they will understand what happens when each is tested under the same conditions. Then the room itself becomes the witness. A room cannot be flattered by a title. The corner of his mouth shifted. Esther lowered her gaze to the drawing before her own smile could become too visible. They worked through the morning, reducing the technical questions to a sequence clear enough for subscribers who had no training in ventilation. Nicholas asked when he did not understand. He did not pretend to know, and he did not turn every correct answer into admiration. That restraint had become its own form of attention. When Wilcox left with the estate steward to inspect the undercroft seals, Mrs. Olney remained within sight in the adjoining room. The quiet changed. It no longer belonged entirely to the work. Nicholas looked at the copy beneath Esther's hand. Why did you stop putting your name on drawings before this one? The question reached a place she normally kept guarded. I did not stop entirely. But you said your solicitor found clients without identifying you until necessary. That was safer. Safer for whom? Esther set down her pencil. For everyone who wanted the work without explaining why a woman had done it. Rain tapped softly against the glass. When my father's health failed, I prepared nearly all the working drawings. Clients praised the later plans. They said his lines had become clearer and his measurements more disciplined. Did they know? Most did not. And those who learned, Esther looked toward the locked evidence case. One landowner approved a drainage plan for 6 tenant cottages. He praised the fall of the channels and the way the waistline avoided the well. A week later, he discovered I had prepared it. What did he do? He returned the plan. Nicholas's expression hardened. Was it wrong? No. His surveyor had already checked it. Then why? He said his tenants would lose confidence if they knew a woman had determined where their waist should run. The absurdity of it had never made the humiliation smaller. Esther continued before pity could enter the room. My father submitted the same plan under his name. The landowner accepted it without changing one measurement. Nicholas said nothing for several breaths. And you allowed that? I allowed the cottages to receive proper drainage. That answer cost you. It paid me enough to continue. She picked up the pencil, then put it down again. Women are often permitted to be useful, so long as usefulness remains anonymous. Recognition makes people examine whether they approve of the person before they admit the work is sound. Nicholas's gaze remained on her face. Walter understood that. He depended upon it, and I nearly repeated it in another form. Esther did not rescue him from the truth. Yes, he accepted the answer. I inherited the dukedom at 24, he said. My father took a fever in November and died before the week ended. On Monday, I was the son expected to observe. By Sunday, every steward, tenant, creditor, and relative was waiting for me to decide something. Esther turned toward him. Nicholas rarely spoke of himself except where responsibility required it. What did you decide first? To release grain after a poor harvest, then to close a bridge that had become unsafe. then to dismiss an agent who had stolen rents from widows who could not read his accounts. Those were good decisions. They were. His voice remained even. They were also praised beyond reason. Men twice my age told me speed was strength. They said hesitation was weakness, and that a duke who asked too many questions invited disorder. He looked toward the winter garden. I learned to act before anyone could accuse me of failing to act. Esther understood the pattern now. Nicholas had not become controlling because he felt nothing. He had become dangerous when feeling sharpened the habit everyone else had rewarded. At the failed trial, you were afraid someone would be harmed. Yes. Then angry when Walter blamed me. Yes. And you believed authority could end the danger. I believed my name could force the room into justice. His gaze returned to hers. Instead, I placed myself between you and your own voice. He did not repeat the apology from Worcester. He did not ask her to say the wound had closed. Part of me still wants to solve everything quickly, he said. I don't trust that part merely because its intentions are generous. Esther felt the honesty more deeply than a promise of perfection. Remorse matters only if it changes the next action. I know. Do you? 3 men have offered to replace Walter and complete the apparatus before spring. Esther had heard nothing of it. You refused them. I postponed every appointment. Because you expect me to accept the commission? No, the answer came without delay. Because installing another man's design now would allow Walter's assembly to be removed, the subscribers appeased, and your authorship quietly forgotten. I will not repair my winter garden by erasing the dispute that exposed it. The estate will lose the season. Then the estate loses the season. You could have told me earlier. I feared it would sound like leverage. It might have. So I waited until the decision became relevant to your work. Esther looked down at the safe lines on her measured copy. Nicholas had not preserved the commission as a prize for her. He had preserved the evidence of what had been done. The distinction mattered. Footsteps sounded faintly in the passage. Nicholas rose. Wilcox will return. I should leave you to continue. He bowed and turned toward the open door. Esther watched him walk away and felt the old instinct to remain silent. Silence had once preserved employment, family peace, and other people's comfort. Now it threatened to conceal something true. She reached out and caught the sleeve of his coat. Nicholas stopped at once. He looked down at her fingers on the dark cloth, then back at her face. He did not move closer. Esther? She released his sleeve, but did not step away. You changed the next action. A quiet vulnerability crossed his face. I am trying to change the one after that as well. The distance between them held no command. Esther could hear the measured sound of his breathing. She wanted comfort, but not rescue. She wanted closeness that remained hers to choose. Nicholas seemed to understand. May I hold you? He asked. Esther stepped forward. His arms came around her slowly, one hand resting between her shoulder blades and the other at her upper back. She closed her fingers once in the fabric of his coat. His breath left him near her hair, soft and unguarded. The embrace did not ask her to forget smoke, accusation, or the moment he had spoken over her. It held all of them and demanded nothing. Esther rested against him for several heartbeats. When she shifted, Nicholas released her immediately. They remained close, but the choice had returned to her before the warmth had faded. Wilcox entered carrying a sealed envelope. His expression ended the stillness between them. This came from a London messenger. Esther took the envelope only after he recorded its arrival. Inside, Walter declared that, unless she withdrew her, accusation within 5 days, he would submit copy B to a technical journal under his own name, accompanied by a statement that Esther had altered the damper instructions after his design was complete. Nicholas looked at her, but he gave no order. Esther folded the notice carefully. Then we must make the evidence travel faster than his lie. By the 7th of February, Walter's lie had acquired the appearance of authority simply by being printed twice. His second circular reached Worcester before breakfast and travelled that morning to the estates of subscribers who had witnessed the failed trial. It claimed that Esther had copied her late father's calculations, altered Sir Walter Crowther's completed design, and then encouraged the Duke of Malvern's personal interest until an engineering dispute became a matter of favoritism. Lady Deborah strengthened the accusation from the drawing room at Crowther Grange. Visitors were received beside a bright fire, while she spoke sorrowfully of Esther's ambition, her long dependence upon the family, and the danger of allowing private affection to interfere with public judgment. Mrs. Olney learned this from 2 former servants, who sent notes to the Worcester lodging. Esther read both notes, then placed them beneath Walter's circular. "He has changed the question again," she said. Mrs. Olney stood near the window, her face tight with anger. "He says you copied your father now. Because the evidence is beginning to prove he copied me, and he has named his Grace's feeling without knowing it." Esther looked at the sentence, suggesting that Nicholas's attachment had corrupted the inquiry. The words struck more deeply than Walter could have known, not because they were true, but because the feeling between her and Nicholas had become real enough to be used against them. Then the inquiry must be built so that no one needs to trust his affection, she said. At the writing table, Esther drew a clean sheet toward her. She did not write as a dependent niece, asking society for fairness. At the top, in deliberate black letters, she placed the name Walter had treated as an embarrassment, Miss Esther Fanshaw, draughtswoman and designer. Beneath it, she invited the same subscribers to return to the Malvern Winter Garden on the 16th of February for an independent public examination under Samuel Wilcox's direction. The inquiry would address 4 matters only: the chronology of the 2 drawings, the tetrade records governing the altered apparatus, the physical comparison of the disputed components, and a controlled test conducted under witnessed conditions. She did not identify the watermark, list the order of witnesses, or mention comparison A. At the bottom, she added that no finding would rest upon family relationship, social rank, or the private opinion of His Grace. Mrs. Olney read the invitation twice. "That sentence will anger him." "Which man?" Esther asked. Mrs. Olney's mouth softened. "Sir Walter." Esther signed the page. "Then it may also frighten him." Samuel Wilcox arrived before noon with proof sheets from the Worcester printer. Comparison A had been cast from the dimensions in original tracing A under Wilcox's supervision. Its spindle was centered, its width matched Esther's drawing, and a separate maker's mark had been struck beneath the collar. Wilcox had measured the component before it left the foundry, wrapped it in oiled cloth, enclosed it in a locked wooden case, and sealed the case with numbered wax impressions witnessed at the foundry. "It will be taken to Malvern Court tomorrow," he said. "The case will remain separate from Walter's installed assembly, and both sets of seals will be entered in the same custody ledger. No one opens comparison A before the 16th, Esther said. No one. Wilcox placed the report beside her invitation. "The London Journal has acknowledged my notice that authorship is disputed. They have not yet declined Walter's article, but they will not print the drawing before receiving his supporting papers. Then he still has time to send copy B. He may send a reproduction from memory or another tracing. Then the editor will ask why he cannot produce the sheet named in his own statement. Esther considered the risk. Send the invitation to the editor as well, not as accusation, as notice that the original evidence will be examined publicly on the 16th. Wilcox nodded. That is defensible. By the 10th, the printed invitations had gone out. That afternoon, Esther travelled to Malvern Court with Mrs. Olney and entered the temporary drawing room, where Nicholas waited with the estate steward. Original A and copy B remained sealed in Wilcox's evidence case. Comparison A stood inside a separate cabinet in the steward's office, its seal numbers copied into the custody ledger. Nicholas read Esther's invitation in silence. His gaze lingered on the heading. You have named yourself exactly as you choose to be known. Yes, then every estate notice will use the same form. He returned the page rather than placing it among his own papers. The winter garden will be prepared according to your written instructions. Esther spread a single sheet showing the 4 stages of examination. The subscribers may know the categories. They must not know the exact sequence. Why? Because Walter will prepare objections to whatever he expects first. I want him answering what is before him, not performing rehearsed outrage. Nicholas almost smiled. You have learned his preferred method. I learned it by surviving it. The answer erased his smile. He looked toward the grey outline of the winter garden beyond the windows. I want to promise that no one will speak to you that way again. Esther set down her pencil. You cannot promise that. I can make it costly. That is not the same thing. No. He did not defend the impulse. It is not. Esther crossed the narrow distance between them. Mrs. Olney and the steward remained visible through the open connecting door. Nicholas stayed where he was, allowing her to choose how close she came. She placed her palm against the front of his coat over the steady beat beneath it. His breath changed, but his hands remained at his sides. Promise what belongs to you, she said. Your conduct, your words, your place in that room. His gaze held hers. Then I promise you will speak first. I will not interrupt you. I will not announce guilt before Mr. Wilcox completes his findings. And your own error? I will name it publicly without excuse. If Walter insults me, I will let you answer unless you ask me to intervene. And if I do ask, I will stand where you place me. Esther left her hand over his heart. Only then did Nicholas cover it lightly with his own. Warmth moved through her palm, intimate because it contained restraint. His eyes dropped once to her mouth before returning to hers. The silence between them changed. Esther remembered his arms around her in the drawing room, the care with which he had released her, and the truth. Neither of them had yet spoken. Nicholas lowered his head by the smallest degree, then stopped. Esther. Her name held both question and warning. She wanted to close the distance. She also knew Walter had already tried to turn Nicholas's feeling into evidence against her. Their first kiss would not be something county society could imagine, had purchased her courage or shaped her proof. Her hand remained beneath his. After I have stood there in my own name. Nicholas closed his eyes for one brief moment. When he opened them, disappointment had not become pressure. Then I shall wait. He lifted his hand first. Esther stepped back by her own choice. Before either could speak again, a footman entered with an envelope bearing Lady Deborah's seal. Esther opened it at the table. Her aunt offered public joint credit with Walter. restoration to Crowther Grange, and an end to every damaging rumour if Esther removed the confinement memorandum from the examination. A final line added that Walter's London statement would leave for the editor before the hearing, unless she accepted by the following evening. Esther folded the letter once. Nicholas did not ask what she intended. He waited. She placed the offer beside her printed invitation. "Let him send it," she said, "by the time London reads his claim. Worcestershire will already be coming to watch the room decide." On the 12th of February, Lady Deborah arrived at Esther's Worcester lodging before noon with no companion and no visible uncertainty. Mrs. Avery admitted her to the front parlour, where Mrs. Olney remained beside the open connecting door, and Esther stood behind the writing table. Lady Deborah carried the cream envelope Esther had received 2 days earlier. She placed it between them, as though repetition might make surrender reasonable. "You have had time to consider." Esther did not touch the letter. "I considered it before I finished reading." "Then you have allowed pride to answer for you." "No," evidence answered. Lady Deborah removed one glove finger by finger. "Walter is prepared to acknowledge that you contributed to the design. Your name will appear beside his. Crowther Grange will be open to you again, and the rumours will stop, provided the confinement memorandum disappears. It is a household instruction, not an engineering fact. It explains why I was prevented from naming the work before Walter claimed it. It explains that you were agitated and required quiet." Esther looked directly at her. "Then why must it be hidden?" A flicker of irritation crossed Lady Deborah's face. "Because no family survives if every private error is carried into public rooms. The error stopped being private when smoke entered a room full of subscribers. Walter made an adjustment. He copied my design, reversed the damper direction, ordered a wider housing, and prepared my initials as his defense. You cannot prove what he intended. That is why there will be an examination." Lady Deborah moved closer to the fire, though the room was not cold. "You are risking your place in society for a word." "Which word?" "Designer." Esther rested her hand on the back of the chair before her. "Walter may receive credit for whatever he truly contributed. If he chose a material, paid a workman, or suggested a harmless alteration, the record may say so. He may not receive my conception, my calculations, and my safe design as the price of family peace. No respectable patron will employ you after this. Then I will lose employment, not myself." Lady Deborah's expression hardened. "You think the Duke's affection has made you untouchable. His affection has nothing to do with whether the drawing is mine. It has everything to do with the protection you imagine you possess." Esther thought of Nicholas standing beneath smoke and announcing that no one might question her without his permission. The memory no longer confused her because he had named the harm and changed his conduct. "I do not want protection purchased with my silence," she said, "from you or from him." Lady Deborah went still. "Nicholas Redmayne will tire of being corrected. Then he will tire. The design will remain mine. You would choose strangers over your own family. You locked me in a cold room so Walter could present my work. Whatever family required before that moment, you chose what it would mean afterward." Lady Deborah's composure thinned. "You will regret humiliating Walter. He has had every opportunity to tell the truth before anyone else does." Esther lifted the envelope and returned it. "My answer is no." Lady Deborah took it with enough force to bend one corner. "The London statement leaves tomorrow. Then the editor will receive notice that the original evidence remains under independent seal. You believe paper and iron will save you. No, I believe they will speak more honestly than we have." Her aunt left without farewell. Mrs. Olney remained quiet until the outer door closed. "You did not raise your voice once." Esther looked at the place where Lady Deborah had stood. She would have called that proof against me. By late afternoon, Esther had travelled to Malvern Court with Mrs. Olney. The final witness list lay open on a narrow table in the conservatory passage. Through the glass doors beyond, the winter garden stood under a pale winter sky. Every access point sealed and Comparison A locked separately in the steward's office. Nicholas approached after sending word through a footman. Mrs. Olney remained in the adjoining room with the door open. "Lady Deborah visited you," he said. "She offered joint credit again." And silence about the confinement. "Yes. Did she threaten the London statement? It leaves tomorrow." Nicholas's jaw tightened, but he did not issue an order. "Do you want the hearing postponed?" "No. Even if the journal receives Walter's account first." "Especially then." He studied her face, not to overrule her, but to make certain the answer was truly hers. "Then the 16th stands." Esther closed the witness list. "You are troubled, yes, by Walter, by what this may cost you even after you are proved right. The truth has already cost me. It may cost more. That does not make delay safer." Nicholas stopped at the distance she had taught him to keep. "There is something I need to say before the hearing, not because I expect an answer, and not because I want to alter any choice you make." Esther's pulse changed. The embrace in the drawing room and the almost kiss over her invitation had already brought them to the edge of this moment. "Then say it." His expression held none of the certainty he used before tenants or stewards. "I love your mind. I love the way you refuse easy praise when accuracy matters more. I love that you can be wounded without becoming cruel." He drew a careful breath. "And I am afraid that anything said by a duke may sound like pressure, even when he means it honestly." Esther held his gaze. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing you do not freely choose." His voice lowered. "I love you, Esther. You owe me no answer, no commission, and no future for saying it." The words stood without demand. They did not ask her to erase the winter garden, excuse his mistake, or turn gratitude into devotion. That was why she could answer them without fear. "I love you, Nicholas." Emotion crossed his face so openly that her own breath caught. "That is why I need you beside me on the 16th, not before. Me. I will be there. You will let me speak first. Yes, you will not use what we feel to defend me in ways I have not chosen. I will not. And if the evidence does not prove everything I believe." Pain moved through his eyes, but his answer did not hesitate. "I will still love you. The inquiry does not purchase my feeling, and my feeling does not purchase its outcome." Esther stepped closer. Nicholas remained still, leaving the final distance to her. "May I kiss you?" he asked. She lifted her hand to his cheek. His skin was warm beneath her palm. Once he had believed urgency justified action. Now he waited. "Then kiss me, Nicholas." He bent slowly. Their lips met with tenderness rather than haste. His hand settled lightly at her waist only after she leaned toward him. Esther touched his shoulder and returned the kiss fully, choosing every second of it. When they parted, he did not follow. He remained close enough for their breath to mingle and waited again. Esther looked at the man who had learned that restraint could be an act of love. Then she rose slightly and kissed him a second time, brief and certain, because acceptance could also begin with her. When she stepped back, his expression held wonder without triumph. "No proposal," she said softly. "Not tonight. No promise that the hearing will be easy. I would not insult you with one. And no mention of this before the subscribers. The truth will stand without borrowing from us. 3 mornings later, before dawn on the 15th, Walter arrived at Malvern Court and demanded access to the Undercroft, the installed damper, and the sealed case containing Comparison A. Nicholas met him at the Eastern Service entrance, with Wilcox, the estate steward, and 2 footmen present. You have no authority to deny me access to my own work, Walter said. Wilcox held the custody ledger open. Ownership is disputed. Every seal requires listed witnesses. I must verify what she has built against me. Nicholas looked toward the dark outline of the winter garden. Nothing has been built against you. One component was made from your signed order. The other was made from Miss Fanshaw's original design. Tomorrow, both will be examined under the same conditions. Walter's face tightened. You are choosing her. No, Nicholas said. Tomorrow, the evidence will choose the truth. On the 16th of February, the same subscribers who had fled the Malvern winter garden through smoke returned beneath a hard blue sky to watch the room answer the questions society had tried to turn into gossip. Frost silvered the outer panes. Inside, no fire had been lit. Samuel Wilcox stood before the western stair with his custody ledger open, while his clerk read aloud the numbers impressed into every wax seal. The Undercroft door was intact. Walter's installed damper housing was intact. The locked case containing Comparison A was intact. The evidence case holding original tracing A and copy B was intact. Each number matched the record signed the previous evening. Esther stood at the center table with Mrs. Olney seated behind her and Mr. Reeve, the carpenter, the estate steward, and 2 workmen waiting near the Undercroft rail. Nicholas stood several paces to Esther's right, not at the head of the room. Walter and Lady Deborah remained opposite her. Walter's expression was composed, but his gloved fingers tightened whenever Wilcox touched a seal. Esther looked across the faces that had watched her leave beneath accusation. This examination will begin with the work, she said, not with my temper, Sir Walter's standing, or his Grace's affection. Paper, trade records, and iron will be considered in that order. Wilcox broke the evidence seal and removed original A first. He placed it against a framed pane of clear glass where winter light revealed the red silk repair, the 3 registration pinholes, and the brown correction over Esther's earlier calculation. Copy B followed. When he aligned the upper edges, 3 fine brass pins entered both sheets through the same holes without resistance. The later lines settled over Esther's geometry with small hesitations where another hand had traced decisions it did not understand. Wilcox lifted the lower margin of copy B toward the light. Harland & Sons, 1852 issue. This mold entered use on the 2nd of January. He indicated original A. This sheet bears their 1851 mark. Mrs. Olney rose. The red silk was on Miss Fanshaw's drawing before Christmas. I watched her mend it. Walter said, "That doesn't prove anything except that she possessed an earlier sheet." Esther answered, "An earlier sheet containing every line your later copy reproduces." Wilcox placed both tracings in separate protective sleeves and opened the trade file. Mr. Reeve identified the certified copy of Walter's signed order for a 24-inch left-handed damper with an offset spindle and outward-facing blue mark. He then identified the certified extract from the foundry delivery work ticket, recording the widened housing and 3rd fastening left of center. Did Sir Walter ask you anything beyond the written specification? Esther asked. Reeve looked toward Walter before answering. He asked whether a low fire might appear to draw safely for several minutes before stronger draft exposed a fault. A murmur moved through the subscribers. What did you tell him? That it might. I warned him there was no honest way to promise how long. And his reply? He said a short demonstration was all he required. Walter stepped forward. A founder's memory isn't a contract. Wilcox turned to the carpenter. The man produced his signed statement and confirmed that Walter had personally instructed him to widen the recess by 2 inches and add the 3rd fastening. Walter's jaw tightened. Construction always requires adjustment. Esther looked toward the sealed undercroft. Then the adjustment will be tested. Wilcox led the witnesses below. Esther descended with them. Nicholas remained above until she looked back and indicated a place beside the stair landing. Only then did he follow. The first seals were cut and entered into the record. Workmen loosened the 3 fastenings and removed the front plate. Walter's damper assembly emerged from the housing. It was broader than original A allowed. Its spindle offset to the left, its motion reversed from the safe path, and Mr. Reeves' foundry mark sat beneath the collar exactly where he had described it. Wilcox then opened the separate case, containing Comparison A. The second damper was narrower, centered, and marked beneath the collar with the distinct symbol recorded at the foundry under his supervision. He placed both pieces on trestles side by side. The difference required no technical training to see. One was made from Sir Walter's signed order, Wilcox said. The other was made from Miss Fanshaw's original drawing. Walter's voice sharpened. A comparison made after the dispute proves nothing. It proves how the apparatus behaves when built from each set of instructions, Esther said. Under Wilcox's direction, Walter's altered assembly was returned to its exact installed position. A measured quantity of fuel was placed in the furnace. The eastern doors were set at the same opening recorded for both tests. A smoke taper and narrow wool strips were positioned above the central register. At first, the smoke rose weakly. Warm air touched the tiled walk. Then the fire strengthened. The offset plate crossed the bypass before the main flue opened fully. The wool strips fell toward the register. Grey smoke curled into the winter garden. Several subscribers stepped back, remembering the first trial. Wilcox ordered the fire damped and recorded the result. After the chamber cleared, the altered assembly was removed. Comparisons A was installed without changing the fuel measure, door opening, or register position. The second fire was lit. Smoke drew toward the main flue. The wool strips lifted steadily. Warm air rose through the register without carrying smoke into the room. Frost began to soften along the nearest lower panes. No one spoke until Wilcox closed his notebook. The apparatus operates safely when fitted with the component made from original A. It fails when fitted with the component ordered by Sir Walter Crowther. Walter looked from the 2 dampers to the gathered subscribers. She could have prepared both designs. She could have created the dangerous version and blamed me after the fact. Esther faced him. You presented the safe drawing as yours and the dangerous copy as mine. If I created both, why did you claim the version that works while placing my initials beneath the version that fails? Walter opened his mouth. Esther continued. Why did you ask Mr. Reeve how long the failure might remain hidden? No patron would have accepted a woman's signature, Walter said. The words came out before caution could stop them. I gave the design a chance to exist. Esther's voice remained quiet. You gave yourself the right to own it. Lady Deborah stepped forward. Whatever Walter believed, Esther's confinement has been exaggerated. She was distressed and required quiet. Wilcox produced the housekeeper's daybook. Mrs. Olney read the entry in Lady Deborah's hand. Miss Fanshaw indisposed. North door to remain secured until after the showing. Wilcox then displayed the pension letter offering Mrs. Olney income and a favourable reference if she withdrew that record. Lady Deborah's face lost its careful sorrow. I wanted one uninterrupted hour. Walter needed his Grace's confidence before Esther confused the matter. Before I named the work as mine, Esther said. Silence settled beneath the glass roof. Nicholas did not step forward until Esther looked toward him. Miss Fanshaw designed the safe warming arrangement, he said. Sir Walter copied it, ordered an altered component, and prepared her initials as a defense against the failure he knew might follow. He paused. I must also state my own wrong. At the failed trial, I used my title to claim control over Miss Fanshaw's authorship and papers without her consent. I called that protection. It was another form of erasure. No one moved. Nicholas continued. My commission with Sir Walter is cancelled. The estate solicitor will pursue repayment of the advance and additional foundry costs under the contract. Mr. Wilcox will send the documented findings to the London editor. No article submitted by Sir Walter may reproduce estate plans or claim Malvern patronage. Lady Deborah's position on the Malvern County Improvement Subscription Committee, which operates under my chairmanship and funding, is withdrawn. He placed a sealed draft contract on the table before Esther, but did not open it. It's an offer for an independent commission in your own name. Take it away. Have it reviewed. Refuse it, revise it, or accept it after no less than 48 hours. Nothing said in this room obliges you. Esther picked up the sealed draft. I'll answer after it has been examined. The subscribers began to leave more quietly than they had arrived. Some bowed to Esther. Others could not meet her eyes. Nicholas approached only after the final witness had signed Wilcox's record. He stopped an arm's length away and offered his hand. Esther looked at the man who had once spoken over her and had now waited until her evidence, her questions, and her voice had finished. She placed her hand in his. Their fingers closed before the same people who had seen her walk away alone. Nicholas did not lead. Esther turned toward the doors, and together they left the winter garden, while behind them, Mons Comparison A held the draft. Cleanly and warm air rose through a room that had finally obeyed her design. 48 hours after the public examination, Esther returned to Malvern Court with the draft commission marked in her own hand. Samuel Wilcox accompanied her, and a Worcester solicitor named by neither Nicholas nor the Redmayne estate sat beside him. Esther had crossed out the clause permitting the estate agent to correspond with workmen in her name. She had added that no alteration to the warming arrangement could be ordered without her written approval, and that every drawing, calculation, and corrected specification remained her property, whether the commission was completed or cancelled. Nicholas read each amendment before looking up. Are these your final terms? They are the terms under which I can do the work honestly. Then they are accepted. He signed without bargaining. Esther signed only after her solicitor confirmed the wording. Payment would be made directly to her in 3 installments. And no estate account could treat her earnings as a favor or household allowance. When the documents were witnessed, Wilcox placed a separate receipt on the table. There is one matter left from the inquiry. He opened his locked evidence case and removed original tracing A. The waxed linen remained intact. 3 pinholes marked the upper margin. The red silk repair held firm at the lower corner, and the brown correction still crossed the bypass channel, where Esther had changed the first calculation before Christmas. Wilcox read aloud the condition in which he returned it. Esther checked every detail, signed the receipt, and placed the tracing inside the same leather portfolio that had carried it out of the north room. The portfolio closed beneath her own key. Nicholas watched, but did not reach toward it. "It is where it belongs," he said. Esther met his gaze. Yes. The consequences of the hearing arrived more slowly than applause, but they endured longer. The estate solicitor demanded repayment of Walter's advance and the additional foundry costs created by his unauthorized alteration. To meet the first payment, Walter sold a parcel of non-entailed woodland beyond Crowther Grange. The London Technical Journal declined his article after Wilcox supplied the custody record, the watermark findings, and the signed foundry order. 2 landowners, who had discussed improvements with Walter, postponed their commissions indefinitely. Lady Deborah remained at Crowther Grange, but her place on the Malvern County Improvement Subscription Committee passed to another widow whose interest in public works required no locked doors. Invitations that had once arrived each week became fewer. Mrs. Olney formally resigned from the post she had already ceased to perform. Her letter stated that a housekeeper might keep keys, accounts, and family confidence, but she could not be required to keep falsehood. Several weeks later, the Malvern estate advertised a salaried position supervising the public rooms of the Winter Garden. Mrs. Olney applied through the steward, supplied her household records, and was appointed because 27 years of difficult service had taught her how to manage people, money, and doors without abusing any of them. Esther spent the spring completing the corrected warming arrangement. Comparison A became the pattern for the permanent component. Every dimension was checked twice. Every alteration was entered in writing. Every workman received instructions signed by Esther Fanshaw. Nicholas attended technical meetings only when she invited him. When present, he sat at the side of the table, asked questions, and accepted correction without turning humility into performance. Their courtship began only after the inquiry had closed and the first payment had reached Esther's account. Nicholas sent calling cards. He visited her Worcester lodging in daylight, while Mrs. Avery or Mrs. Olney remained nearby. They walked beside the river with a proper companion several paces behind. He learned that Esther disliked violets, but kept rosemary near her writing desk because its clean scent helped her think. She learned that he forgot luncheon whenever an estate report contained conflicting figures. Once, during a sudden shower, he began instructing a footman to move her drawing case beneath the carriage awning. He stopped before finishing and turned to her. "Would you like it moved?" Esther hid a smile. "Yes. The rain is not improved by principle." "I'm relieved. Your amendment was timely. I'm learning that good amendments usually are." By June, the apparatus had passed repeated controlled trials under varying wind and fire strength. On the morning, Esther received the final installment of her fee. Nicholas asked her to walk with him through the cloister garden of a married cousin's Worcester house. The French windows remained open behind them, and his cousin sat within sight. Nicholas stopped beside a stone bench, but did not kneel until Esther had turned to face him. "May I ask you something that has nothing to do with iron, smoke, contracts, or evidence?" "You may ask." He went down on one knee. "Will you marry me?" "Not because I opened a door. not because I believed you, not because you repaired anything belonging to me. I'm asking because I love you, and every future I can imagine truthfully has you standing beside me in it." Esther looked at the man who had once believed decisive action could settle every difficulty, and who had learned that love sometimes required waiting for another person's answer. "I will marry you," she said. Hope broke openly across his face. Esther added, "After I have read the settlement." Nicholas laughed, warm and unguarded. "I expected nothing less." 2 trustees were appointed, one chosen by Esther and one agreed upon jointly. The settlement preserved for her separate use every drawing, professional paper, fee, and future earning. Her father's documents remained hers. No estate agent could correspond with a client in her professional name without written consent. No design created before or during the marriage could be reproduced elsewhere without her approval. Esther requested those last 2 provisions herself. Nicholas accepted both without objection. They married in August at a Worcester parish church before a small gathering of friends, witnesses, workmen, and Mrs. Olney, who wept once when Nicholas waited for Esther to complete her vow before speaking his own. Marriage did not close Esther's professional life. It gave that life larger rooms without surrendering the key. In November, frost whitened the Malvern lawns for the public dedication of the completed winter garden. Estate families, tradesmen, subscribers, and schoolmistresses gathered beneath the glass, while warm air rose evenly through the floor registers. Children held narrow, red paper strips above the grills and laughed when the current lifted them. No smoke entered the room. Near the central aisle, beneath Esther's final signed plan, a brass plate read, "Warming arrangement, designed by Esther Fanshaw, Redmayne." Nicholas had asked which name she wished engraved. She had chosen all 3. Fanshaw honored the father who taught her to measure. Redmayne marked the husband she had freely chosen. Her own name stood first because the work was hers. After the guests departed, Mrs. Olney supervised the closing of the public rooms and left Esther and Nicholas alone beneath the glass. Frost feathered the outer panes. Inside, the red test strip moved steadily in the warm current. Esther opened her leather case. Original Tracing A rested safely beneath the final plan. Beside it lay her father's worn, boxwood folding rule. She unfolded the rule across the lower margin, let the darkened brass hinge settle beneath her fingers, then folded it again and returned it to her own case. Nicholas stopped beside her. He did not assume even now. "May I take your hand?" Esther placed it in his. His fingers closed around hers, familiar and warm. She looked at the brass plate, then at the man who had learned that admiration did not confer possession. "I love you." His expression softened. "I love you, Esther." He lifted their joined hands slightly. "And I shall never again mistake admiration for ownership. You may admire me a little. I'm grateful for the permission, provided you remain accurate. Then I admire your mind, your courage, your impossible standards, and the fact that you revised both a commission and a marriage settlement before allowing me to sign either." Both documents improved. They did. Esther stepped closer. Nicholas waited. She touched his cheek, rose slightly, and kissed him because she chose to. His arm came around her only after she leaned into him. When they parted, his forehead rested lightly against hers. Outside, winter held the gardens in white silence. Inside, warm air moved beneath the glass Original A, and her father's rule rested in her own case. Her name shone in warm metal, and Nicholas stood exactly where he had promised to stand. Beside her,